Outline for today is we will spend a few minutes reviewing the webinar 3. It was a few weeks ago, means in fact a few months ago. So it's better we should look what we had covered there a little bit. And then revisiting the industry cluster location quotient tools. So in webinar 2 and webinar 3, we had focused on industry cluster. Webinar 3 was specifically about industry cluster location quotient tools, and some of you had completed the exercise. There were some questions. So what we will do is we will look at the website again and see, and I will again review how the tool works. And then we will go to occupation clusters. A little bit about statsamerica.org innovation website. So similar to industry cluster data, occupation cluster data is available here. And then we will go to regional decision maker occupation cluster mapping tool, and which will be covered by Andrei, and some explanation of the exercise and then question and answer. So before we go on occupation cluster, let's revisit the regional decision maker website. And I think Andrei has shared this link. This website is a prototype website. This is a beta format. But if you go to GIS Atlas, the Indiana data, local decision maker LDM, and the national data regional decision maker is available here. So industry clusters location quotient is the name of the mapping website, mapping services, where industry cluster LQ tools are located. So if you click on this link, it will open you the website, and we have done this in webinar 3. So all I wanted to show you was the corridor LQ calculator tool. I have run this tool beforehand so that we could save some time. But the idea is that if you click on this tool icon and select any of the lines and draw along the interstate or any of the state highway, this mapping website, as you can see, there are these white thin lines. These are part of the National Highway Planning System. The way the tool is designed that it can calculate corridor LQs for interstates, for state highway, even for a major through corridor, because not every rural region or suburban region can have interstates. So the tool operates on the full National Highway Planning System network all over the USA. So if you draw along the corridor, just draw it and then click submit, it will give you the results of the combined location quotient for that corridor region. So all the counties that are getting intersected, it will calculate the location quotient for 2010. Now there in the exercise, there were some questions that there is too much of data here and there are some legibility issues. And what we will do, we will be getting a web programmer, and he will be working with us like how to increase the font size and make it good looking and legible. But here, as you can see, the tool calculates quite a few places after decimal. So we will be rounding off so that it has become easier to read and interpret. Now there are a few extra new tools that has been added on this website, and these tools have 08 marked. So these tools are for the year 2008. So what we are trying to say you that the tools are continuously under development. So any website that we have shown you, for example, the industry and occupation cluster employment website, which Andrei has been showing, and these location quotient website, please keep visiting them regularly, because as we are designing new tools, we are continuously adding and updating that. Now, what is the advantage for having location quotient calculation for 2 time periods? In webinar 3, we had shown you a bubble chart. and bubble chart to identify what are your star clusters and what are your matured clusters, which clusters are emerging and which clusters are transforming. So if you recall, the bubble chart is actually based on location quotient analysis, or what we call as specialization or the capacity of regions to export. So a star cluster are those clusters for which the location quotient has increased between two time periods, say 2008 to 2010. So if location quotient has increased, that means the region has increased its specialization or the capacity to export. At the same time, the location quotient for the most current period, 2010 in this case, shall be higher than 1. So if location quotient is higher than 1, then economic based theory says that you have enough specialization to export. What we see as practitioner is greater than 1.2 to 1.3 is really a good LQ. Means those are the cluster that you can really focus on. So this was just a quick review of what we had covered in webinar 3. I will go back to the PowerPoint and then we will start with the occupations. So what exactly are occupation? The dictionary definition is these are vocations which you can perform for livelihood. But we need to look into the occupations by the way they are used to define the economy. If you look at it from the industry side, the industry definitions are through North American classification system, the North American industry classification system, the NAICS code, and these codes, they go from 2-digit to 6-digit. So if it is 2-digit, then there are 24 industry sector, and if it is NAICS 6-digit, then there are thousands of sectors. You may recall that NAICS is a relatively new classification system. It came in 1997. Before that, it was SIC or Standard Industry Classification. There is a subtle difference between the way NAICS was designed. NAICS industry codes are based on processes. The focus is more on the process used by industry, whereas SIC had a more emphasis on product. What is the final product, or rather commodity, which is being manufactured or developed by the industry. So conceptually, these two are different classification system. Now, because it is based on process, so you can see there are a lot of NAICS code, or there are a lot of industries identified even within the agriculture, forestry, the first NAICS code, which is for the production. You can see there are a lot of NAICS code defined based on, just because the processes are different. So for example, fishing industry, there are different ways that clams, they are catched or they are collected. Means sometimes they are collected by hand, sometimes they are by net, but just because process is different, there is a specific NAICS name and definition for those 2-3 different types of industries within the clam, means within the clam processing industry, in the broad category of fishing. So census, if you go to census website, you will see that detailed NAICS codes, there are 19,000 of such codes there. But the data, when they collect it, it is grouped together. And that's why the NAICS 6-digit, you find there are at least thousands of sectors, at least like more than 3,000, around 4,000 of sectors which are there and through which the industries are defined. That is one way to look into the economy. Now there is another way to look into the economy, is based on occupations or people who are engaged and who are working in these industries. Currently there are more than 800, in fact close to 900 occupations that are classified as the Standard Occupation Classification System, SOC. And SOC goes up to 5-digit code. And as you see, relative, there are thousands of industries, but then occupations, we have around 900 of such occupations. And within these occupations, every kind of job people are working, they are classified somewhere within this SOC category. SOC is updated annually. And you can see there is always email notices from Bureau of Labor Statistics or ONET system that a new occupation has been added. So for example, the latest occupation which has been added is climate change analyst. This is the new occupation which has been identified by the ONET, which is Occupational Information Network and Bureau of Labor Statistics, that there is a category of professionals who are focusing on climate change analysis, and that's why the occupation of climate change analyst has come in. Similarly, I'm a planner, so within the planning broad group of occupation, earlier we only used to have urban and regional planner. Now there is another new occupation added there, which is called as planning technician. It has been added. In transportation planning, we used to have transportation planner and transportation engineer. Now there is emphasis from a transportation group that the travel demand modeler, these are transportation planner who only works on travel demand forecasting, that should be included as a separate occupation, because the characteristics, the job requirement of this occupation is so distinct. So NAICS as well as SOC, these are evolving system, they are continuously changing, but when we are talking about occupation cluster, we are now focusing on the SOC or Standard Occupation Classification System. So what are occupation cluster? There are three characteristics, means there are three major areas through which occupations are classified. Knowledge. So by knowledge we mean like how much you know about physics or chemistry or math or history or social sciences. Skills. There is a separate set of skills. Like for example, there is analytical skill. Some people, they have this natural skill, or they learn it through education and training to do analysis, or quantitative skills or qualitative skills. Abilities are the individual abilities. For example, some people, they have spatial cognition ability. They can easily understand the directions and geography. But these occupations, if it is within a group, and when we say that it's an occupation cluster, that means the occupations which are defined there, included there, they have some sort of characteristics which is similar, like formal educations, degree certifications, experience, expertise, wage level. So these are the characteristics which could be almost similar within the occupation cluster. Now there are two topics here, two concepts here. One is industry cluster, and then another thing is occupation cluster, and both actually intersect because both are related to the regional economy. So if you want to study occupation cluster, you can select one industry cluster within a geographic region and see how the occupation clusters are distributed, or you can select one occupation cluster within the same region and study how it is shown or what is the concentration in different industry clusters. So there are two ways you can look into the intersection of occupation and industry cluster. Now why it is important to study occupation cluster is, if you know your occupation cluster, what are the concentration of workers and knowledge workers which are there, then it is easier to develop career pathways and career ladders, because usually within the same occupation cluster it is easier for people to change jobs. So if you have any workforce related strategy, for your economic development, or you're thinking in this direction, then occupation cluster is a very useful concept and tools. Now, why we want to study the occupation cluster? And actually, this concept that we need to focus on industry and occupation both is not a new concept. It came out decades ago. Means the first paper was written by Thomson and Thomson. But the idea is, when you are looking at industry, it is about what regions make or what are they manufacturing. But if you want to look into occupations, it means what regions do or what actually you are performing in the job. And in economic development, it is always advised that you need to do analysis of both industry and occupation cluster. So that not only you can do industry targeting, you can also do occupation targeting. Because many times when a new industry wants to locate into the region, they actually see what kind of talent pool, what kind of workforce strengths you have. So occupations are equally important. So as said, that the emphasis of regional economic development strategies are that we need to have strategies for both occupations, which means talent, which means what is the workforce skills and talents, that concentration that you have, as well as industries. Now, one advantage of occupation is we always think that rural regions, what kind of assets they can have, and you will be surprised by the specific concentration of specific areas of knowledge, skills, and abilities that can be available in the rural regions. And especially occupation cluster is essential, as we have heard that today's era is all about the knowledge-based economy. So it is also what is the knowledge content, knowledge concentration of the region, and that is what it makes it distinct. So here I will run an audio by Lee Llewellyn. He's our project manager for the regional decision maker.
Probably already know this, but in 2002, Richard Florida published the book, The Rise of the Creative Class. And it created a lot of discussion at the time, and it really focused on the fact that communities that had a strong culture, arts culture, that had a music scene, were attracting lots of young people, young people with technology degrees, were flocking to places like San Diego and Seattle and Austin, Texas. And it was a real reversal in terms of how people had understood the connection between workforce and economic development in the past. And what Florida was able to demonstrate was that really for the first time we were beginning to see an inverse relationship between workforce and economic development. In the models in the 1950s and 1960s, and even for a while into the 1970s, the model had always been that a company, usually a manufacturing company, would pick a site, and they would be attracted to a site somewhere in a state. They would be attracted there by cheap land, cheap utilities, incentive dollars, and all of that stuff would come first. The factory would be built and founded, would open, and then workers would come to where that particular job site, that factory was. And what Florida was able to see for the first time was that young people in particular, and people with technology degrees, were choosing where they wanted to go first. They were picking a city because of cultural attributes, and they were going there first. And then they were finding a job. And so it wasn't so much the fact that the jobs came first. It was that people were selecting where they wanted to live and be first, and then the jobs would sort of follow them. So what we've really seen in the past 10 or 15 years is a real reversal of the way in which site selectors, people who are looking for places to locate jobs, the way in which they look at things. The way a site selector who was working on behalf of a company used to operate is that they would look for, again, the land, the incentives, utilities, rail lines, all that other stuff first. And then somewhere down the list of attributes of a community would be workers. I mean, it was always assumed that the workers would come to wherever you built the facility. And we now look at it from the standpoint that workers, and we now think of it less about sort of workers, but it's really now a focus on talent. We now know that site selectors oftentimes will look first at workforce, will look first at available talent before they ever narrow down the list of communities that they're considering for a facility to locate. And if they don't see the talent there in place first, they eliminate that community. So site selectors now are looking first for talent and workers, and if they can see that pool of talent, educated, trained workers first, then they'll go to the next step and start looking at what kind of sites are available. But it's been a real reversal in terms of the critical role that workforce and talent plays. And probably one of the best examples that we've seen of that in the last, it's been 3 or 4 years ago now, but the Anson development in Boone County, outside of Whitestown. Medco is a national, maybe even international, pharmaceutical company that does a lot of its business online. They do a lot of specialty pharmaceuticals and pharmaceutical formulation, but again, they're primarily an online pharmaceutical service. They were looking for a new location, and the reason they ended up in Boone County was that they were able to identify that north on I-65 was the Purdue Pharmacy School, and south in Indianapolis was the Butler Pharmaceutical School, Pharmacy School. And so seeing that they had a source of 2 pharmacy schools at either end of that corridor really then put Boone County, Whitestown, Lebanon on the map and really drove that location. So the reason that we're talking about workforce and talent is because it really is one of the critical drivers of economic development today.
Yeah, that was Lee Llewellyn. Thank you, Lee. Now, let's explore a bit. We all talk about like knowledge-based economy. What exactly is the knowledge-based economy? And here is the OECD and Georgia Tech definition. So it's basically production, distribution, processing, and use of knowledge and information. So if we talk about agricultural age, and actually this is the research by Georgia Tech and universities in Japan pertaining to innovation. If you look into the agricultural age, the emphasis was more on land and labor. Now, for industries or industrial age, capital was important. But then today, in the knowledge-based economy, it is the knowledge quadrant, how much talent the region has, or what kind of knowledge, what kind of patents are there with the people, the institution, the industries. Those things are very important. And they can make or break a region. That's the competitive advantage now, that if you have talent or the so-called knowledge workers in your region. So how could we define the cluster? So I am explaining here a little bit about the methodology. So ONET, which is the Occupation Information Network, it classifies these groups of more than 800 occupations into 5 zones, 1 through 5. And these zones, they are based on preparation, the education and training preparation one needs to get into an occupation. So zone 1 needs little or no preparation, zone 2 needs some preparation, but zone 5, for example, needs extensive preparation. So all the doctors and specialists, they are all in zone 5, or scientists, where you need several years of graduate education and PhDs. So here are some examples. Zone 5 are aerospace engineers, surgeons. Zone 4 are chemists, sales manager, several of engineers, they are in zone 4. Zone 3 are like insurance people, electricians. But then there are examples of zones 2 and zones 1, and you can see, you can assess the level of preparation needed. So what we did, and this is all based on quite a bit of literature, academic research on how previously occupation clusters were identified. Previous to Purdue's work, our center's work, there was no extensive data made for whole of USA. So our database is first of its kind. And what we did was we selected zone 3, zone 4, and zone 5 because you need certain level of education, training, and preparation to be into one of these occupations. And then we actually ran a clustering, a statistical clustering technique. Now, as I had said, there are 3 areas: knowledge, skills, and abilities. They are based on worker requirements, and that is where we had emphasized. Means there is abilities also which is based on worker characteristics, but skills, knowledge, and education, this is the area, these are the variables that we took to define our occupations. So if we see that if we say that there is occupation cluster and you have strengths in mathematics, statistics, data analytics, and big data people, that's one group of occupation. It is focused on knowledge attributes, your education and training attributes. Now, every occupation can have unique characteristics, but at the same time there are overlaps. So what happened was this statistical clustering technique, when we ran it, so for example, it grouped all the engineers into one occupation and then grouped all the natural scientists into another occupation. And how it did? The education characteristics had 33 variables. There are 33 education category, and within each an occupation requires you need to have certain level of that subject area and the importance. So all these statistical clustering was done based on the knowledge levels. So our occupation cluster are actually the knowledge content. They are based on the knowledge content of those of the specific occupations. Now the list of occupation cluster, and there are quite a few. So we have 15 occupation clusters, and as said, means these are all based on the knowledge, training and education required to group them. So you can see occupation cluster number 6 is IT, information technology. Means these are all results of the clustering technique, and it actually grouped them together. Engineering and related sciences, this is one group. All the occupations related to agribusiness and food technology, this is another group. Now healthcare and medical science, it was such a large group that and the algorithms, they were indicating that it has to be subdivided into 3 groups. So medical practitioners and scientists, all the doctors, the specialists, the radiologists, they all are grouped in one place because their education and training requirement is much higher than the medical technicians. And these are all the laboratory people and phlebotomists and the triage people, all the technicians who are involved in health sector. And then the social sciences side, therapy, counseling, nursing, and rehabilitation, it all came into one group. So in total, we have actually around 18 of such occupation cluster, and the data has been developed for every county, and the data is being developed for every year. So you can actually see the location quotient of these occupation cluster. So whether you have concentration of information technology, and sometimes this information can be very surprising to the rural regions. And in the next webinar, we will be covering some analytics and some data visualization, like how we can visualize and use the occupation cluster information. Now, what could be the uses here? Of course, you can know occupational strength, but basically you can know the knowledge and the talent people. Now, is there a match or mismatch between regions, industry cluster and occupation cluster strength? That kind of analysis can be done. Or how well positioned the region or communities are. It will give you where you stand, some idea of where you stand in this knowledge-based innovation economy. And let me give you an example here. If you look into biotechnology or biotech and pharmaceutical cluster, Indianapolis, Boston, San Diego, these are all, if you look into their location quotient, they are very high. Yes, the regions, the metropolitan regions of Indianapolis, Boston, and San Diego, because these are all well-known biotechnology centers. Then what exactly is the difference? For difference, you need to see the occupation cluster. And then you can see the characteristics of the biotechnology cluster, how it is differing from one region to another region. And that's why I said the intersection of industry and occupation cluster can be very useful information, because it can exactly tell you what are the exact competitive advantage of your industry cluster, where actually the focus is, and what is the concentration of talent within that industry cluster. So this slide, and this is, we have been showing you that the statsamerica.org innovation, this is the public website, and all the data that we are developing, and this is all available here. So you can actually go to that website, and I think I can show you a few minutes here. Go to the data here, go to the website, click on tools, and then in the cluster analysis, all you need to do is get occupation cluster data, and actually the occupation clusters are available here. You can get it for US, a metro region, micro region, states. So if you click on a state, you can get the state total or a particular county. And then you can also build custom region based on the tabular information here. But then we, as you have seen, that we are developing a specific set of tools to develop custom region in Regional Decision Maker. So I will be going back to the, let me go back to the presentation. Give me a second. And then now I will request Andrei to come and show you the interactive mapping part, the regional decision maker part of the occupation cluster.
Thank you, Indranil, and good morning, everybody. If my voice is too quiet, let me know in chat window. But and I'll move my phone also closer. Okay, so today we'll look at the map, interactive map, online map for occupation clusters, and in fact we'll be using the same map or web page that we used for industry clusters. So here is overview of things that I'll show you. We'll kind of revisit the drawing tool and data query tool on that page, and also we'll use custom region summary tool for occupation clusters, which is similar to tool that we use for industry clusters. So let me now switch to a browser window and show you our web page. And in fact, we'll be using our new server for this page. So let's look at the list of layers that we have for this website. Again, industry clusters, you've seen before industry clusters on that web page. And there are occupation clusters, layers for occupation clusters. So one is occupation clusters, job density. It's on the top of the list. And I'll talk about that layer and show you in a minute. Then occupation clusters, jobs, and occupation clusters, LQ layers. And also we have a few more layers related to occupation clusters at the bottom of the list. These are historic maps for employment and LQ in occupation clusters. And in this list, you can see we have data for 4 years. It's 2001, and then 7, 8, and 9. Unfortunately, there is no continuity between 1 and 7, but that's just the nature of data that we have. But again, still, it allows you to do to look back into those historical data. And also historic maps for occupation, LQ maps for occupation clusters. And also there is a map that can show you temporal change, animated temporal change in LQ and employment in occupation clusters, for occupation clusters. Now let's look at occupation clusters, jobs first, and I'm putting on arts, entertainment, and publishing, and here I'm using Zoom to State tool to go quickly to Indiana. So I click on Indiana in the list, and here we are. So the color scheme is very similar to industry clusters. So I'll click on the map legend icon in the menu, in the top menu, and here it loads the legend for this particular map. I can open this window more. And here you can see employment numbers and related colors for this occupation cluster that we're looking at now. Okay, so I'll close my map legend, and I want to demonstrate draw widget. So this is the tool that you can use to put any graphics on top of your customized map. And the good thing is about this tool is that since the last time we modified the tool, and right now you can save your graphics, and then when you come back later, the other day maybe, you can load this graphics on top of your map again. So let me show you how it works. Say I want to look at the region in North Central Indiana, for example. So I want to draw a polygon around my region. So I choose a polygon option in the menu in my pop-up window. Then we don't need any fill color because I want only boundary around my region. So we set alpha value to 0, which means we're not going to have any color inside. For outline color, I want red, and I want my boundary be thicker. So I set the value to 4. Also, there is an option to show your measurements, but I don't need that right now. So now I'm ready to draw. So I'll start from this corner, and I draw this line around my supposed region. You can be as accurate as you want to. It could be really rough drawing. And by the way, there is an option to change this boundary later. So to finish in my last point, I double-click and now I have my boundary permanent. So to save this boundary, we click on that icon, floppy disk icon in the top of the pop-up window. And let me use the maybe desktop. So the name is saved graphics, but you can give it any name, and it saves the settings as a TXT file. So I save that, and actually it disappears for some reason, and that's just how the tool works. So to put it back, I just open this file again using this other icon with open folder. So now we have our boundary back, and I want to add actually title too. So I print say Central Indiana, and I want to make it bold and let it be Arial font, and I change font color to black, and probably size 20 will do, and I don't want any halo. So I click in the area where the middle of my label will be. So I click here, and here we go. Now, if I made a mistake, I can always click on clear drawings written here on the pop-up window, and it will clear all graphics in the window. And I can again bring up my boundary again and redo my label, for example. So now I save my boundary into file again along with the label. And you will get this warning about non-standard fonts, but just ignore this this message. So and I will name it Save Graphics 2. Okay, and yeah, as usual it disappears, but so you can come back anytime later, and you can load this graphics. So here you go. So the other tool, oh yeah, by the way, if you want to keep this graphics on top, you need to have this pop-up window on. So to minimize, you can minimize it, make it very small, and move somewhere to the bottom of the screen. This way it will not interfere with your view. So now I want to demonstrate Occupation Cluster Summary tool. And this tool works exactly the same way as it does with industry clusters. So I click on this icon in the top menu, Occupation Cluster Summary. Pop-up window appears on the screen, and I select Draw Polygon option. So now I draw the polygon that touches all this sets the polygon of selection, and I click Submit. Now it takes just a few seconds, and it will calculate job numbers for this particular region for all occupation clusters. So here you can see those numbers. And this is, again, this is employment for each cluster for all counties included in this region, summarized. And the last tool that I want to look at is Query tool. So, and again, it's kind of revisiting what we did with industry clusters. Okay, here I have my whole state. So I am interested, for example, to find counties in Indiana that have employment more than 2,000 people in, say, agribusiness and food technology cluster. So I open this, I click on this icon, Search Data, and this pop-up window allows me to select from this menu. Now, right now, the menu is there is no structured menu to show you industry and occupation cluster. So you have to scroll down to find occupation clusters, and it's closer to the bottom here. here LQs, and okay, this is occupation cluster now that we are looking at. And I said agribusiness and food technology. So, and I select the search criteria, and you can copy and paste from example, and I'm entering 2000. And let me just copy this into buffer. So now, instead of clicking search now, because this will search the whole United States area, I go to graphical search, and this will add and give you an option to select or limit the area of search. So I check this option, include text query. That will use my text query. And also I click on select by polygon option, and I select all counties in Indiana. And again, you have to be careful not to touch counties in neighboring states, but all within Indiana. So I'm finished. I double click on my last point, and here is looks like only Marion County has employment more than 2,000 people. Let me go back, and I just want to double check that this is not an error. So let's make it less number, say 1,000 people, and again go back to our spatial boundary window, and from here we can again outline boundary of the state, select all counties, and let's see, yes, now I have more counties included. And so you have an option of the list here. You can look at the list, and at the same time you can see them on the map. Those counties that have employment more than 1,000 people in agribusiness and food technology cluster, occupation cluster. So the other options would be to look at occupation clusters job density. And let me quickly show that before I switch to the next step. I'll put on industry clusters as my background, and I'll explain in a minute why I do that. So I want say biomedical and biotechnical cluster, industry cluster. Okay. And I put on top occupation clusters job density. And what would be related to biomedical, maybe healthcare, let's see. So what you see right now is dot density map. And this map can be displayed only at smaller scales, which means you have to zoom out further to see that map. Now each dot represents, and this is in the legend here, each dot represents 500 jobs, but they are not spatially specific. There is no exact geographic location. These are random points within each county. So each time you display a map again, they will be different. They will be in a different location. So this is just to give you an idea how much jobs you have, how many jobs you have within each county comparatively to other places. And the reason I displayed industry cluster map in the background is that you can see if your occupation density correlates to industry cluster that you're looking at. For example, here I think it's a pretty good correlation with those areas with higher biomedical industry counties. But also you could see that there are some in the areas where jobs in healthcare, also pretty numerous in the areas where biomedical is not actually that high. So this is probably the last thing that I want to show you. There are also LQ maps, and LQ maps works exactly the same way as they work for industry clusters. Let me just put one as an example. Here we go, LQ map for arts and entertainment. By the way, I think this is probably Brown County in Indiana that stands out for arts and entertainment because there are a lot of art-related businesses in this area. And this is probably the last thing. Also, there are a set of tools that are very similar to industry clusters, and we used them before. Chart tool, shapefile upload. You can look at the cluster time machine, which is animated maps from different years. You can also click everywhere on the map on the county, and it will bring a pop-up showing you LQs or employment, depending on the map you are looking at, and show value for different years. For occupation clusters, we have 5 years. It's 2001, and then 7, 8, 9, and 10. All right. So now I'll pass the word back to Indranil. Well, yeah, we'll be adding exercise for this map soon on our website. So just keep looking at the web page.
Thank you, Andrei. And as Andrei has been showing the employment maps and location quotient map, you might have realized that you need to look into several of these indicators to decide whether you have competitive advantage. So if a county is large, like Cook County or Marion County, there can be a lot of dots for the employment. But as soon as you switch over to location quotient map, Brown County emerges. And that's why the employment, the jobs, the establishments, location quotient, and average wages, these are few of the indicators through which you can assess whether the region or the county has competitive advantage or not. Now, we are also developing the set of location quotient calculation tools for occupation cluster. It will be similar to how it will operate for industries, and we will be covering those in the next webinar. In addition to that, we will be covering other kinds of visualization technique, and there have been some surprises. For example, when we map engineering and related sciences occupation cluster, Martin County, Indiana has a very high location quotient. And then when you look at that map, and we will be sharing, it gives a very interesting profile. All the national laboratory, Idaho National Lab, Sandia National Lab, Argonne, and New Mexico, means Santa Fe. So everything, and including our Martin County, and then the labs in Virginia, and they all emerges as a very high concentration, very high location quotient in engineering and related sciences. Some of these are rural areas. So that's why occupation cluster can be very insightful in regional planning. So now I want to go back to the PowerPoint, and Andrei has covered employment, and these are just screenshots of the maps that Andrei has shown. And what we will do is Andrei will be preparing a simple exercises, and we will be sending to you, and if you can do it, it is good. It gives us feedback, and it has been very helpful to us. Some of the comments that we get, what we need to improve. For example, last time we got the comment that we need to improve the legibility, and which is true. So we will be working on that, and that has been very helpful to us. So with this, we will be ending the webinar and opening it for question and answers. So any question, please let us know. Any question you have on a tool or previous tool? Anything?
By the way, could you tell us who is right now on a conference call? Who is using the phone? Because we're very interested to know how many people on the phone.
Lisa Gilhausen.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, as we are developing tools, and as I have said earlier, we are constantly adding new tools. But what we are doing is the two main websites that we have shown you today, all the tools we are adding there. So for industry and occupation cluster analysis, those two mapping website, one which Andrei has shown, you know that was also, that it was the same website for industry cluster employment analysis, and then the location quotient analysis website, both will be the same. And it will be the same set of tools for industry and occupation cluster, so that like there is no problem in using them. Means if the tools are the same, but they are giving different results, means one is calculating industry cluster and one is calculating occupation cluster. In the next webinar, we will be covering the intersection of industry and occupation cluster, because that is very important, and that is what makes every region unique. Means you can be very surprised what kind of talent concentration, even if you are in a rural area, you can have. Some of our colleagues like Ed Morrison and Scott Hutchison, they have been moving around the states and different parts of the country doing such analysis, and even rural regions can have very significant concentration of knowledge workers, and that can be very insightful. So in the next webinar, again, means it will be much more in depth of occupation cluster analysis and a whole set of tools for location quotient. So any questions? We will be waiting for a few more minutes. Any questions, any thoughts, comments?
I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Is there any type of transportation data or like live work relations?
Yes, and as I said that there is going to be a series of webinars. If you recall our first webinar, we had shown a chart like which are the areas where we are developing mapping websites and tools. Transportation we will be covering, but it will be coming after occupation cluster. Yes, we have the transportation data. We have developed, in fact, there are 2-3 very concentrated mapping websites that we are developing for transportation. And just to give a background, what we are doing is not only we are processing all the public data sets that they are, and of course you can see the whole USA, but then there are some tools also, and there are some ways to look into the goods movement or the supply movement aspects of commodities through a data set from Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So we will be covering those topics as we go through the webinar, but if you are interested, then maybe after we finish the occupation cluster, then we can go to the transportation part. So yes, transportation, demographic attributes, the demography part, then the general economic indicators part, natural resources, and then specific mapping websites for food systems analysis. These are all under development. And these are all included in the webinar, but we will be covering them topic by topic. Any more questions? So if there isn't any, we will be finishing the webinar today. Thank you for joining us, and we know that you all are professionals, very busy, and sometimes it becomes difficult to finish the exercises, but when you answer those and give us feedback, it becomes helpful for us to improve the websites. Because as you know, when we are technical people, we are sitting here in the office designing the website, and basically we are designing it for our users, planners, regional planners and regional and GIS analysts. So the feedback can be very useful to make it user friendly. So with this, we will be ending this webinar. Thank you for joining us. Thanks everyone.